Hi, my name is Terry Markson, and I'm the Senior Librarian in the Exploration and Creativity Department at the Los Angeles Public Library. I hope you've all completed your summer reading challenge, but if not, you can still go to lapl.org/summer. Today, I will be introducing our final LA Made program for the summer. LA Made focuses on a diverse landscape of Los Angeles, highlighting the immense artistic, cultural, and performance talent that is developed in the course of the city's eclectic history. I would like to thank the National Endowment for the Humanities, our Library Foundation, and our behind-the-scenes staff for helping bring these programs to you virtually. LA Made will be returning next month with a series of new virtual programs for the fall. The first will be in 3 weeks on Thursday, September 17th at 4 p.m., featuring Inca, music from Peru. And now I would like to introduce today's program. Sustainability, More Than an Ethos, a panel moderated by the owner of Cottonwood Urban Farm in Panorama City, Elliott Kuhn. The panel will discuss growth and development of a more sustainable Los Angeles. Joining Elliott will be Michael Martinez from LA Compost, Natale Zappia, Associate Professor of History and Director of the Institute for Sustainability at Cal State University Northridge, and Rachel Surls, Head of the UC Master Gardener Program and Adjunct Professor of Urban Agriculture. The panel will discuss growth and development of a more sustainable Los Angeles, as I said. So over to you, Elliott.
Hey, thank you, Terry. Hello, all. Welcome to this LA Made program. It's my honor to be here and to be facilitating this program today. I'm really excited to be able to sit down with the three panelists today, and I hope that we can flow through this in a very casual, conversational way. And for those watching along on both YouTube and Facebook, please feel free to put questions into the comments section. They'll show up here, and I'll try my best to integrate them into our conversation today as we move through sustainability, more than an ethos, all right? So I'd like to welcome the panelists, and I know Terry already did a little bit of an intro. I'm going to go ahead and just expand upon that intro. And as I introduce you, at the end, I got two questions. One, what's the best thing that came out of your garden this season? And what project are you currently engaged in that you're most excited about? All right, so I'll start with Rachel Surls. Rachel Surls is the Sustainable Systems Advisor for University of California Cooperative Extension in LA County, part of the UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. She directs the UC Master Gardener Volunteer Program in LA, which helps residents learn to grow their own food and garden sustainably. Rachel is a member of the leadership board for the LA Food Policy Council and the co-author of the book From Cows to Concrete, The Rise and Fall of Farming in Los Angeles. Welcome, Rachel.
Hey, Elliott. Thank you for having me. So you want me to answer those two questions now?
I would.
Okay. So I've got a lot of great basil coming out of my garden, but the nicest surprise this year was a plant that I thought was dead actually came back and was beautiful this spring. It's called hummingbird sage. It's a native. It attracts hummingbirds and pollinators. I thought it had died, but it turns out it was just dormant. So it's a great reminder about the resiliency of native plants in our landscapes.
That's great. Beautiful. And any current project that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to work with some students at Cal Poly Pomona to reboot a great project called Cultivate LA, which is a mapping project of urban agriculture and school gardens and community gardens in Los Angeles.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Next up, we have Nat Zappia. Nat Zappia is Associate Professor of History and Director of the Institute for Sustainability at Cal State Northridge. His work explores the intersection of food systems, indigenous political economies, and ecological transformations across early North America. He served as the Executive Director of the Garden School Foundation, developing garden-based curricula for students of need in South Los Angeles. And more recently, Zappia has co-founded Open Garden, an agricultural history app connecting urban garden spaces with historical environments in Los Angeles and around the world. Welcome, Nat.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be here. So, of course, I have my last name I've given away. I'm an Italian American, so I don't want to talk about my tomatoes because this is what we love to do. So I'm going to talk about something else that's actually, I think, hopefully it'll come up in our conversation. I was part of an effort to plant an orchard of intercropped orchard of avocados and coffee plants out in Whittier, California last year. And I'm not directly working with the orchard right now, but I did help plant them. And one of my colleagues just sent a picture of the first coffee, the cherries from the coffee plant growing already from the row that I actually planted. So I'm really excited about that. It actually worked. So I'm really excited about at CSUN. Hopefully we'll get to talk about this too. It alludes to or connects with some of the things that Rachel has just mentioned. Biodiversity. We're part of a pollinator pocket project in the Valley, San Fernando Valley, that's attempting to convert vacant lots and so-called derelict properties and turning them into these biodiversity hotspots, emphasizing pollinating plants. So excited to talk about that with you. Thanks for having me here today.
Thanks, Nat. Last but not least, Mr. Michael Martinez, certified master gardener, former elementary school teacher, and the founder and executive director of LA Compost. Michael has over 8 years of experience building gardens and compost systems throughout the county of LA, as well as other parts of the country. Michael has grown LA Compost from a group of volunteers collecting organics with bikes to a decentralized network of community compost hubs that span across the most populated county in the country. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Elliott. And Rachel, I promise to take that first line off since I haven't followed up on my continuing education, I'm sure.
That's always a dirty secret message.
Yeah, no, but thank you for having me. As far as your first question, I would say it's a tie between some incredible alpine strawberries and Pakistani mulberries. Definitely have a sweet tooth, and to share that with my two young ones, it's been a joy these past few weeks. And then the project I'm most excited to be working on right now it's been 7 years in the making, but the state of California, CalRecycle, for the first time ever, put out a grant titled Community Composting for Green Spaces, which our collaborative application was awarded, which we will be establishing over 50 community composting sites across the state of California, from Sacramento to San Diego, establishing close to 30 part-time jobs, hiring from within the communities where these sites are located, and really just doing some incredible job training, best management practices, app development to really streamline and demystify whatever scary thoughts we have of composting in our community. So really, really excited about that.
Awesome. Welcome, Michael. Well, thank you guys. And again, for those following along, both on YouTube and in Facebook, please post your comments. And we have our tech guy here with us helping too. So if I seem to miss him, but we'll try to integrate those as we move along. I want to start with, and I hope this doesn't read like what's the Webster dictionary? But how do we define, or what are these tenets of sustainability? This is this idea that I feel is kicked around. It's, many of the departments you all are working with have this in their title. And so I think for those following along, but just for us in this conversation, how do we wrap our head around this notion of sustainability? Do we need a primer? If we need a primer, I'll have a primer. You want a little primer here? I'll at least give you what the UN World Commission on Environment and Development define it as, all right? Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Again, take it next.
Yeah, I'll start. That definition is always, that's something we all know about. And I think, at least, and I know everyone will agree with me. Just hearing about I'm more familiar with all of your work, but I know your philosophy and the way you think about sustainability. So I know you'll agree with me that, particularly in the context of Los Angeles and right now with COVID and all of the economic, racial inequities that's continued to affect the city, inflict the city. I think sustainability, it has to be, it's not sustainable if it's not justice focused or equity minded, and flows through those corridors of the community. I think that's really where it starts, and this is where the knowledge comes from. And these are the folks who are on the front lines of climate change and I mean, we all are, but there are certain communities that are more impacted by these immediate disparities and environmental racism and environmental injustice. So I think sustainability for me is, it's about the community, and it's about the community needs first. And first, and also first, it is about, of course, it starts with ourselves. It's a meditation. It's a meditative. There's a meditative quality to sustainability that I think is inward focused, but also in direct relationship with the community. So I like to think of, sustainability as something that's we have to kind of keep filling up our soul with meaning and with with a good story that helps us engage with others and to keep that sustainability working. So I think it's that meditative, inward focus, but also the justice and community focused aspect that makes, to me, is what is the core of sustainability.
It seems like that equity idea is something that's really central to a lot of, in digging into, which we'll get to, the Green New Deal put out by Mayor Garcetti's office, realizing that the foundation has to be justice and equity, right? That sustainability is not going to be achieved if that's not at the core of all of these initiatives. Any other thoughts to help round out that definition?
I love Nat's definition, was so great, and I like the internal aspect of it. That was really cool. And I think oftentimes we think of sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability, and it's so important to think about those other pieces that Nat mentioned, the social justice aspects of sustainability, economic aspects of sustainability. We live in one of the most economically stratified cities in the U.S. I think we ranked 7th in terms of wage gaps and economic gaps. So that's something we really have to consider. And it seems like in this whole COVID time, I know we'll talk about that more later, but we're able to think more deeply about some of these other aspects of sustainability. Like, people are actually thinking about economic aspects of the food system that are usually invisible. Like, when did people ever think about and discuss people who work in the meat packing industry before, or truly understand the value of people who are working the checkout counter at the grocery store? I think we really have come to understand a lot more, at least I hope we have, of the breadth of what sustainability really means. It's not just, can we sustain environmental resources for the future, but are we making a good future for everybody?
That's huge. I mean, the term essential worker entering into the collective lexicon during this pandemic, right? Something, what defines that? And quickly realizing, there's a lot of these jobs that were undervalued that are quite essential, especially to a city of this scale,
Yeah, I love that. I love that we're not just isolating sustainability into this cubicle of environmentalism, but really thinking of it as wholeness is achieved through the complex, diverse nature of each part that contributes to it. And the first words that come to mind when I think of sustainability is like to maintain, to avoid depletion, to really recognize that like all life is sacred and what that means to keep that. But I also feel like when I think of sustainability, that's just the baseline. I wouldn't consider that to be the goal, because if we consider sustainability to be the goal of present day 2020, then we're essentially sustaining what we have.
Right.
And I think we need to think beyond sustainability and start to use the new buzzword or the new thought of like regeneration and recreation, and allowing sustainability to be the baseline for something greater than what we had and what we've had.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's key and essential to this, right? And I really appreciate that all three of you articulated that this term needs to be moved out of the narrow slot of just environmental sustainability, right? That it is a more holistic approach. And I guess, okay, so if we're pulling that lens back, we live in a sea of 10 million people. There could be arguments made, is a city of this scale sustainable, and so I wonder, if we're thinking about sustainability, and this will transition into this discussion of the Green New Deal put out by Mayor Garcetti, but what I guess are some of these key parts of coming in and approaching a city like this? We're talking, Rachel, you bring up the stratified wealth inequality that exists in our city. And I just actually saw a post today about a methane link here in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, you know, the environmental injustice that's going on constantly. And so what does it mean to a city of this scale? How do we approach this idea, this holistic idea, and push it forward? What are the markers, I guess, that we're going to look for to know that this is something achievable or even possible? Just big questions. Sorry.
Good question.
Someone just said Shane. That's not a question.
Okay.
I think.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think it's, we're the most populous county in the country, over 10.2 million people. And like, anytime I think of LA and think of like the complexities and like the diverse nature of issues or problems, whatever we want to call it, I think about how that needs to be matched with complex, innovative, imaginative solutions. And definitely working within like the soil compost framework in which I live and breathe daily. The soil food web is this incredible network of mycelia, fungi, nematode, bacteria that literally feed the largest organisms on Earth. And it's only through that network of transferring life and nutrients and water that they are able to sustain and regenerate and create new life. And for me, that gives me, again, depleted word, a lot of hope. And I dream of what LA can be as far as this human network where we start to see what I've heard before, that seed, water, and soil become the most valuable currency. And that our liberation only happens when it's done together. So how do we inhale, exhale? How do we coexist well? And how do we think beyond ourselves, recognizing that our individual actions have a huge impact on everyone around us, not just ourselves. So when it comes to water, seed, soil, air, like that's a whole lengthier conversation. And there's a lot of people in LA County. So when it comes to just like thinking about the natural approach to sustaining and regenerating life, that becomes a little difficult with how we develop and cover soil, how we deplete soil, and how we just move forward, so to speak. But different ways to sustain life is very much possible from the way in which we're currently functioning. And I'm excited to see a lot of examples, including your farm being one that not just sustains itself, but contributes to the life around it, that inoculates goodness, zip code to zip code.
Inoculates goodness. That's beautiful. Rachel, I don't know if you want to jump in. I was going to add some, but
go ahead, Nat.
Okay, I was just going to say, I love that the currency thing, right? This idea of there's a, especially with environmentalism, there has been, as we all know, sustainability, a roping off of nature, preservation. There's different philosophies that you preserve nature, you separate it from the urban. The urban is evil, right? Or the urban is the downfall of humanity. And this, of course, there's some truth to that when you look at it from the fossil fuel equation and all that. However, there is this, the reality is that most of humanity now, just a few years ago or 10 years ago, right, half of humanity now lives in the city. This is the world that we're in. We know, as from Rachel's work, from Cows to Concrete, and from Elliott's work, what he's doing right now, that you could actually, and what Michael's doing right now, that you could actually regenerate that soil, that the soil is, these relationships haven't, they've dissipated in LA, but they're still here. We're only a generation away from the cows, from the farms, right? And the farms are still going on right now, right and hidden in plain sight. So the idea is to rethink currency, as Michael said, right? How we consume, but also reimagine the city, right? And realize that there are ways. Obviously, there's lots of complex challenges, but like a soil web, like a soil food web, there are lots of complex solutions that you need to. And part of it is just embracing the concept that here we are, and we need to. You can't wall off. The idea of walling off nature is we are nature, right? This is a product of nature, and we need to kind of recalibrate ourselves, and then that will help us find those things hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add that I I think that after having sort of watched the sustainability movement for 30 plus years in Los Angeles, I would say there's been a real shift in the past 10 years, a lot more activism, community activism, individual and collective activism. So I really see that as the way forward. We have this incredibly complex county, and I see every time I train a bunch of master gardeners, and then they're all out there helping to start community gardens and school gardens. Every time I interact with one of the working groups at the LA Food Policy Council, or their new food leaders lab, there's this energy around change and sustainability that I don't think was there to the extent that it is now, even like 10, 15 years ago.
Speaking of urban agriculture, I stepped into this realm, I think, like many people maybe in the last 10 years, of thinking about like, wow, urban ag. And what I have found as a hurdle or a wall within LA City is that the bureaucracy and the incentives are not there to make that business viable. And I maybe Rachel, I mean, obviously your book, Cows to Concrete, talks about these golden years of how, I think it was 1906, the most productive county in the nation, LA County, producing food. Is going back to making this space a food producing hub possible? Or is it that we need to look to, as you're doing with the Master Gardener program, teach people to grow their own? Or I felt a wall and a struggle trying to make a business out of urban farming.
Yes, you and everybody else who has tried urban farming. It is not easy to be a farmer, especially when you're dealing with a very small scale. So I do think the city and county have a lot that they can do to remove barriers for urban farmers. Like, for example, the city of LA allows what they call truck farming, where you can grow food on site, or food or flowers, and then you can go somewhere else and sell it, but you can't sell it on your own property. Well, why not? The easiest thing would be to be able to have a little farm stand and sell it right there where you grow it. And those are the kinds of barriers that the city can and should remove, I think.
Absolutely. The other hurdle to me seems to be water, right?
And that's always going to be a hurdle. I don't know that LA will ever be the farming mecca that it was. It seems highly unlikely. I view whether it's personal gardening or urban agriculture or community gardens and what have you, I see them as sort of one tool in the toolkit of addressing sustainability. They can be part of a solution, but a community gardens and urban agriculture are not going to be able to feed 10 million plus people. There has to be a variety of different solutions, corner stores and more supermarkets and all kinds of ways to feed people in addition to having more gardening.
Absolutely. In my foray into this realm, I was lucky enough to meet Michael Martinez about 5 years ago, and we connected. And so we've been running a regional composting hub here in the Northeast Valley. That is one of how many hubs, Michael? 30 plus? And so maybe for folks that are listening and engaging with this for the first time, maybe to me, I guess, in seeing that as a model and going back to your idea about how talking about fungi and the symbiotic relationship in the soil being a microcosm of what we need to execute in the city. Can you speak to this idea of what community composting is and how you see it playing into the sustainability of Los Angeles?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the context of LA, I don't want to speak for every community composter across the country because there's various models. But for us, we're definitely taking on this decentralized approach. I'm born and raised here in LA, San Gabriel Valley native, Northeast LA, but like there's beauty and strength and power in every zip code across LA County. How do we allow for us to add value and structure to that in the same way compost does? And when we start to think about regenerative ecosystems, it's not just a single oak tree or a shrub or a tyon, it's everything in between, everything contributing and feeding and supporting life. So for our approach with community composting, we think about diversity across the structure and capacity, as well as the decentralized nature as far as where it goes. So we kind of have three buckets that focus on individual support, community support, and regional support. And Elliott, your farm is obviously within that regional bucket based off its scale. But the individual support comes in the form of programs offering around work days and workshops and neighborhood soil farmer programs and food scrap drop-off at farmers markets, really getting onto that one-on-one experience and approach and educational model and transfer of knowledge. The community approach is what we've been doing the longest. That's been a cooperative model where we establish compost infrastructure, schools, churches, community gardens, parks, housing projects, apartment complex, anywhere where there's people, anywhere where there's the ability to tell a full story of food. We essentially build the social and physical infrastructure for composting to be done on site. And then the last bucket is that regional model that takes place at parks and urban farms. And here in LA, there's a ton of parks, there's a ton of brownfields, vacant lots, et cetera. So there's space to rethink how we can manage materials and view resources that are reinvested in communities. But these regional hubs are at farms, urban parks, and allow people to engage. As a former educator, I believe the learning is in the doing, and access and opportunity really allows someone to put what was learned into practice. So at any given weekend, Elliott's farm is filled with people dropping off food scraps, but also turning the piles, also feeding the worms, also sifting the compost, also putting that compost on the orchard and seeing that full cycle. So for us here in LA, it's not just this one size big approach, one size model fits all, but let's look at the breadth of the space. Let's look at the diversity of people who call LA home, the diversity of spaces, because what makes compost whole and beautiful is the diversity of ingredients that contribute to its humus-like final product. And I think we can all agree what makes LA incredible is the many people who love this city as we so much do. And for us, it's really leaning hard into the way natural ecosystems work and thrive, and how do we mimic that from a human approach. And our approach is really this human network. How do 10.2 million people work collaboratively in a way that is selfless and life-giving to those around them?
We had a few questions come in with regards to this, so let me chime in with those. And I think it's also just clearly my outline is going to be very aqueous, and we're going to dive in and out of that. So maybe my little 10-minute blocks aren't going to hold up here. But a question came through: are there any future plans for citywide composting programs and not just community? And that, I think, leads into this Green New Deal, correct?
Correct.
So are you able to speak to that, or kind of what those ideas are surrounding that?
Absolutely. So within the Green New Deal, there's a target goal to eliminate organic waste going to landfill by 2028. So just under 10 years, kind of how do we just treat organics in the same way we treat materials that we consider valuable? So the city is kind of broken up. Speaking of city, not county, the City of LA services, and I'll just preface that I am not part of the city. I'm a nonprofit within the city. But LA Sanitation collects the brown, the green, the blue, and the black bin from over 750,000 single-family homes. They are currently in a pilot program for collecting organic material, and the goal is to have composting for all clients or all customers of LA San in the next few years. The issue is processing. Where do we take this material? Where does it go? Because there's no such thing as a way. It has to be processed. How big is the infrastructure in which it's being processed? And there's a very, very stiff permitting timeline in order to get that material processed. In addition, small businesses as well as multifamily units are serviced by different haulers under what's called the Recicla program. And that's all throughout the city. County, there's unincorporated areas, Altadena, Topanga, different areas throughout that are serviced by hauler specific. But as we transition to this Green New Deal, there's very kind of strict goals as far as how we can allow for composting to take place all across the city, as we see in areas like San Francisco and what was once New York, not once, but like their program. And I think for us, we want to see citywide composting, but we still want to see community and backyard composting, because if we're citywide composting, all that material is leaving our city and going somewhere to be composted. And we want to make sure that that finished material is placed on our soils here in the city. When it comes to improving soil structure, water holding capacity, carbon sequestration, like creating nutrient-rich food, you want nutrient-dense soil. And I'm all for all forms of composting. I just want to make sure there's space for all forms of composting to thrive, because it's going to take all forms of composting to thrive in a city like LA.
Yeah.
it seems like in the Green New Deal, they're listing at 2021 and 2025 as a benchmark of sort of a timeline to execute this master plan and to move this forward, which it's pretty rapid for the scale that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Or eliminate organic waste going to the landfill by 2028. That's bold. Yeah. And if folks don't know, I had someone asking, and maybe at the end we can offer this, but people are asking maybe for links to this information or into everyone's respective websites. So maybe at the end we'll do the social media influencer thing and call out all of our tags. But the Green New Deal can be easily found online. If that's something people haven't heard about, that was put out by Mayor Eric Garcetti. And it's basically key principles and benchmarks outlining more or less a 10-year plan of how they're going to try to shift the tides here in Los Angeles in the name of sustainability. Any other thoughts?
Can I actually ask a question about compost too? Because we were talking about this before about, and maybe this is thinking of COVID and like at CSUN, we have a 2025. We have our campus sustainability and carbon sequestration, net zero goals, and 2025 is our waste goal, and a lot of that's of course food waste. This semester, we're now going on 5 months of zero waste, where we've hit that benchmark because of COVID in some ways. And I was just curious, we talk about that as on campus and with the Institute as a way of, when the students come back, there's actually an opportunity to, as we were talking about before, kind of calibrate our mindset and how we think about waste and plastic and how we consume food and all that. And so I was just curious for the composters in the group, and because we were talking about this before, that you said you've seen an uptick in the food waste that's coming, which is fantastic because people are thinking about it. But then I was just curious about the overall food waste consumption, if there's been any, I don't know if you guys could speak to this, has there been any change since COVID, or I guess what does that mean that there's more food waste coming in, and what do you think that's a reflection of?
Yeah, it's interesting because technically more food waste is not always good, right? It means we're not we're not consuming all that we're purchasing or all that we get. That all, if it is in fact still edible, getting to those that are food insecure. But we've definitely seen an increase in food scraps. So definitely seeing people cooking more. Definitely not edible produce, but just the scraps in which they can no longer use, whether it's a coconut husk or the rind of a watermelon. And I think that increase is due to the fact that since mid-March, a lot of stay-at-home orders, a lot more cooking at home, a lot more not working, a lot more not eating out because things are closed. And I don't know, I think that's beautiful, the sacred act of preparing the meal and being connected to food and really allowing people to go outside again and start to garden. And the uptick was on both fronts, on where do I drop off my food scraps? Where do I get finished compost? Because I would love to start gardening for the first time or do it again after so many years. And I think, I guess that's one of the silver linings I want to take from the season is the forced slow, how it's forced us to slow down, how it's forced us to if we are with families, be with families, to cook more, to engage with the soil that feeds us. And we've been trying to keep up. Obviously, there's a lot of demand, and we're only a small nonprofit in a county of 10 million people. So it's a lot of educating, empowering, and equipping people to also figure out how to do it on their own or with their neighbors. And we've seen a ton of people start. So once that learning and the doing kind of takes place, people, they're sold and they move with it for sure.
Let me chime in here with a few comments. Sorry, Rachel, were you going to add something? I apologize.
Yeah, just what you were saying, Michael, it really makes me think that we've really gotten a taste of having a less hectic lifestyle, and a less hectic lifestyle can be a more sustainable lifestyle because now you have time to do things at home like compost and garden if you're lucky enough to have a place to garden. It's given us a taste of is our lifestyle that we live in the US where we're constantly busy, consuming, it doesn't leave us enough space to do these things that are so much more meaningful. So I say that with full knowledge that so many people are suffering right now. And we're in a terrible economic situation that's impacting poor people disproportionately. But we are learning some interesting lessons about why do we have to live the way we normally live? Why can't we have more time to compost and cook and spend with our families?
There's actually a question directed to you, Rachel, and maybe it ties into this about your mapping project.
Yes.
And so what will the map show? Who will use it? What will they use it for?
Yes, the map is called Cultivate LA, and it was first developed in 2013 by UCLA urban planning students, and I worked closely with them. And the map basically attempts to be a census of all urban agriculture sites in the county of Los Angeles, loosely defined. So school gardens, community gardens, urban farms, and nurseries. That was what the students decided to map. And we're able to look at layers, like you can see what's in your school district or what's in your city within Los Angeles County. So it's been used as an advocacy tool. For example, let's say you live in a small city and the neighboring city has more school gardens than you do. So you could go to your local school board and say, hey, we should implement some of the policies that our neighboring school district has, because look how much better they're doing with school gardens. So it's been used by the city and county of Los Angeles to come up with data for having the Urban Agriculture Incentive Zone program. Students from a variety of different universities have used it to do further analysis and research about urban agriculture. So what we're doing is rebooting it because the data hasn't been updated in about 3 years, and it's part of the baseline data for the Green New Deal. All those measurements that they're talking about in the parts about urban agriculture, they use this data to measure progress. So it's really important that we update the data.
Is there by chance an easy web address that could be shouted out to people? Or?
Right now, the map is a little bit frozen. We're in the process of fixing it. Google did something to their platform, and we're getting it repaired. But you can go Google Cultivate LA, and you'll find a very nice website that the students made a few years back.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm trying my best with the comments. A bunch came in. So one, Lewis Ratliff, we're in the Northeast San Fernando Valley in Panorama City. You can come by on Saturdays. Cottonwood Urban Farm. Go CSUN. And then where's the aforementioned orchard in Whittier?
Great question. Well, it's right on campus, actually. So if you're familiar with Whittier College, it's on the northeast side of campus. And our idea with that was to replant, to basically, again, to come back to this cows to concrete and the Cultivate LA, the mapping, and think about these historic spaces as, there it is. All for you, Rachel. So, to reimagine these older landscapes as innovative spaces for entrepreneurial farming opportunities for the communities, to get to Michael's point about the beauty of each community, the unique story of each community and how they can drive this new or some version of their version of sustainability. So we took a site that was actually Whittier College, like Whittier, like many parts of LA, was actually all avocados. And I know Rachel, sorry, Rachel, I keep doing a plug for your book, but I know you have a section about that, and walnuts out in San Gabriel Valley, of course, was one of this Michael's, so that's your home turf there, right? San Gabriel Valley was orchard central. And so the campus used to have orchards, then they got rid of all of them. And we basically took an old aerial map of the campus and spotted a site that was not being used. It was slated to be a dorm like 25 years down the road. And we were able to kind of jostle it loose from the plans of the board by talking about all of these things we're talking about now. And then, so it's kind of like bringing the past in, but then also coffee and avocado is a kind of an innovative, it gets to the soil web again. It's like, it's urban. the thing about farming, as we know, in urban areas, you have to be innovative. You have to really think about this space, and therefore you have to think about the soil. You can't just do the monocropping. You can't do the soy and the corn and the wheat, and then that's it, and do it on a big tractor. So part of it is with that spot in Whittier, which is very suburban. We're trying to create a space that's beautiful and that also is functional and it will be productive. So right on the east side of campus.
Excellent. And the future forthcoming app, Open Garden.
Oh yeah.
That seems like it might. A lot of comments are popping up that folks are very interested in this urban farming map and the Cultivate Los Angeles.
I'll put that in the link for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to speak more to that? But also that there's a lot of cross-pollination between Cultivate Los Angeles. And I think in this digital era, right, the vastness of LA, how do we connect all these people together,
Yeah. Well, things like this. So, I mean, that Cultivate LA is incredible. I've used that map. I love it. It's frozen, right? But it's now I'm so excited that Rachel is part of this reboot. I didn't know about that. So having this is the kind of the benefit of COVID. Another somewhat of a silver lining is these reconfigurations. I'm sure, like I knew Rachel already, but who knows when we all would have got together in this space like this. Perhaps we would have, but here we are. And I think there's so many of these mapping projects happening in different aspects of this. There's Fallen Fruit, which many of you probably have heard about. It's a nonprofit that's all about gleaning community fruit trees and having maps and giving people the tool to go out and find it. There's this stuff like Cultivate LA. The Open Garden is very similar. It's open source. So after I talk, I'll put the link in so anyone can download it. You can go to your iPhone or your Android and download it as an app. So it's open source. So it takes a lot of the data that Cultivate LA does. So you can see LA, all the urban farms, community gardens, school gardens, but you could also, in real time, tag a garden and write a little, basically a personalized story about it with an image, and then it's basically open source. So and it's used everywhere around the world. So we've got cities all around the country that have been using it. We've got people all around the world actually using it. You'll see when you go on the app, you could actually zoom out and scroll around the world, and you could see all these different urban gardens all over the place. But the one cool thing is, again, I keep plugging Rachel's book, but I can't help it. But we do have this time machine layer on the app where you could actually go to, let's say, the corner of Western and Western and Washington, for instance, and you could see a school garden there, and you could click on it, and you could learn a little bit about it, and then you hit the history layer, and then you could actually see what that corner looked like in 1907, and of course, it's all agriculture. So eventually what we want to do with the app is you'll be able to have like a VR, and you can kind of look and you'll be like in that little time machine. So that's kind of how we're doing it right now. We're adding all these layers to it. And we do want to make it community source, community based. So the idea is it's like Rachel's project. It's a policy tool as well to see where the food inequities are and the lack of, you look at it, you see where the gardens are or aren't. But also to connect farmers and gardeners together and kind of have it a process-oriented map, so very live and very dynamic. And so when you do download it, for all of you listening, we'd love to hear it's still in its early phases. It's live, but it still needs work, and we'd love to get your feedback. And so we're actually in a phase right now where we're actually adding new features. So we're making it bilingual, of course. That's one of the first things we're going to be doing in the coming months. But so things like that we'd love to kind of add more layers to the app. So thanks for letting me do that plug, and thanks for the work you're doing on that too, Rachel.
Yeah, I think that is an amazing overlap. I mean, it seems like Compost Hub should be listed in there too, right? Integrated into that. I would say having this regional hub here, going back to this kind of cultural exchange that you see happening at community gardens, all the people that can connect around agriculture, around composting is a really exciting sort of element to this idea. Again, going back to our symbiotic relationship, connecting over the whole city. Circling back to one comment I missed, Hugh Smitham, I'd like to start composting at my home, and where is a good starting point? And I think a follow-up question to that is it is it better to do it at home, or would it be more worthwhile to contribute to a community garden site or community hub?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And before I do, I just want to make sure that the link that we shared, opensilo.org, the conversation around, there's so many incredible urban ag opportunities and efforts that I just want to plug the Open Silo team and all the incredible work they do. They essentially aggregate everyone's efforts, put it on their website, so it's a kind of one stop to see all the incredible work happening across LA. But in regards to a good start,
they should
learn how to in regards to how to start during time of COVID, it's most in-person workshops no longer are all suspended for the foreseeable future, but both City of LA and LA County are offering webinars, and we, LA Compost, will also be putting how to compost online workshops in English and Spanish on our website by middle of October. If you don't want to wait till then, City of LA, LA Sanitation Department has workshops rotating throughout the month. LA County has their smart gardening workshops that we can, I'm sure, pull links to add that to you, and just various topics, composting with worms, backyard composting, some hints of like bokashi composting, various forms of composting, all taught online throughout the year. In terms of the question in regards to, is it better to compost at home or contribute to a larger scale site? And I guess that varies where you're at. If you're in an apartment, have no space, have a strict landlord that doesn't allow a shoe on your balcony, like it's going to be, you're really limited on what you can do unless you're going to do like bokashi or worms underneath the sink. But if you have any yard space, I would always encourage you to compost at home prior to releasing that away. I would see that food, those food scraps, as nutrients that your soil is wanting. I would view those food scraps as resources that you're reinvesting in your own backyard and your own yard. So I would always recommend composting at home first or within your community before composting at a larger facility. And not to throw any large facilities on the bus, because they're absolutely needed from the goals that we have in regards to diverting organics across the country, across the state and the city. But our local soils are as depleted as ever as far as when it comes to food growing. And the more organics we can reinvest into these soils, the better. And it starts with our own yards. So, yeah.
And so folks following along here, they can turn to a forthcoming series of outreach and classes on how people can start this practice at home?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess piggybacking on that, Rachel, what is the state of the Master Gardener program for this year, given this wild pandemic we find ourselves in?
Well, we started the 2020 Master Gardener class in person in the middle of February. I think we got to have 5 meetings before it abruptly transitioned to being an online program. So we got, thrown into the world of Zoom and online learning just like everybody else. So, a lot of just like Michael was saying about LA Compost and the kind of education we do, a lot of what Master Gardeners do has been in person. It's been at farmers markets and fairs and school gardens and community gardens. So a lot of that can't happen right now. So we're actually in the process of training as many Master Gardeners as we can on using educational technologies so that they're prepared to do things like teach online workshops. We have a beginning vegetable gardener series called the Grow LA Victory Garden certification program, where you can take a 4-week class in basic vegetable gardening. And if you finish it, you become a UC certified victory gardener. That's always been an in-person class for the last 10 years. This fall, it's going to be an online class. So we're doing our best to adapt to offering things in a virtual way. And, it's fun and it's exciting. It's not the same. I think we all miss that one-on-one contact, teaching people how to garden.
Excellent. And for folks that don't know the UC Master Gardener program, I feel like 9 times out of 10, if you meet someone locally that's doing gardening, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a Master Gardener, right? This is a really robust system. It's an amazing.
Nat has been a Master Gardener too, and Nat and Michael have both been Master Gardeners. It just worked out that way.
I guess pivoting and acknowledging the time frame we have left here, and we've been talking about it, but what has been your observations during this pandemic, and maybe no doubt this problems that have arisen, but maybe the solutions that have arisen too. And I guess as a jumping off point, I'll say that as my urban farm and in the context that we were developing it, I was relying a lot on educational outreach and these things that required people coming together. Well, that quickly evaporated. And in working with a larger farm from Ventura County, we started a CSA program. And something that seemed very intimidating prior to, but in the advent of this pandemic, we're in the 23rd week of this, and it became this immediate need that we stepped into. And so it's been a very interesting process to have that happen during this whole time of social distancing and isolation and all that, and closing down the garden to people. But what are you seeing in your respective areas where is problems and solutions, I guess?
Well, I work with a network of people around California in cooperative extension. That's where the Master Gardener program is housed. We work with urban farmers around the state and farmers in general. And CSAs are huge since COVID started. There's something about really understanding where your food comes from. We saw this in 2008, 2009 with the financial collapse. Suddenly everybody wanted to, get to know their local farmer, go to the farmer's market, have a garden, and we see it now too. So CSAs have boomed. That's been great for small farmers, including urban farmers. But the collapse of the restaurant industry has been horrible for small farmers. It's, absolutely a terrible thing for the many farms that relied on restaurants for their for a lot of their produce. So it's all a balancing act for small farmers. It is a really, really rough time for farmers in this country, especially like yourself, people who are growing fresh produce. However, there now is this interest from the public that I'm hoping that we can tap into more.
The pivot that I saw with some of the farmers in Southern California, I'm talking, again, I guess going back to the only thing, looking outside of LA County at this point, in my opinion, and looking at Riverside, Santa Barbara, a lot of these farmers that are farming large scale, but multi-crop, usually certified organic, it became direct to consumer. Wholesale, right, to the markets, to restaurants, all went way back. And then it was this massive pivot into, okay, well, we need to go direct to the source. And so the number of CSAs that I saw pop up in the last 6 months was really wild. And I wonder if that's not going to be something that's going to be longer lasting. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important question you ask. In fact, we're getting ready at UC to try to start some research on that in regards to how sustainable that these CSAs will be, what customer motivations are, whether this is something that will really continue to sustain small farms in California or if it's more of a temporary phenomenon.
Oh, Nat, I think your volume might be off. Can we get it?
Oh, good. Someone had to do it every session. Oh yeah, you got to hit mute. Unmute. Sorry about that. It gets back to our, the beginning of our discussion about the philosophy, right? And what strikes me about you, me about you, Elliott, is that the work you're doing is, like Rachel said, farming is not. It's not, it's hard work, right? But you also have this philosophy about sustainability, about the community, not to say that you need to be in the humanities to get that, but you do have a humanistic background, right? You come from education as well, and Michael touched. We actually were all educators in that way, right? So I think this is where we get that philosophy. I think part of what I think Rachel is going to probably find is that a lot of those, because the mindset is the crucial thing that comes first, and I think those that have that, and then you match that with the work, the realization how hard it is to farm and sustain that. That's really those are the ones that are going to be left, I think, and those it gets to the idea of sustainability. Part of it is you have to convert, you convert people to your cause, if you will, but it's preaching to the choir, if you will. It's expanding the choir or making being in the choir a lot more fun, so that it's affirmational, I think it's kind of how we see it at CSUN. It's less about especially for students, right? It's less about don't do that, don't throw your food out. It's more about, oh, you could put it in this compost and look what happens here, or this is the kind of affirmational thing you can do and be part of the story rather than a virtue signaling, right? Even if you're not doing that, that's what ends up happening, I think. So I think part of the future is going to be about expanding that affirmational story, which is, I love how Michael had framed LA, is right. And what everyone loves about LA is folks who come here and folks who are from here. It's the neighborhoods, and it's it's so big and it has this kaleidoscopic micro climate landscape, right? That with these really interesting stories, but then there's this mosaic that can be really tapped into. And that's what I love about rivers too in LA, because no one even knows that there are rivers, like the LA River, right? And of course, more and more folks are realizing and that's going to be like the lifeblood, those waterways, which of course will help rebuild our ecosystem and recharge some of that groundwater eventually, so it doesn't go out to the through the concrete to the sea. Yeah,
part of that Green New Deal, right? I think a 25-year plan, more or less, to try to decanal good sections of the LA River and increase infiltration.
Yeah.
At the tail end, you were talking about the compost. I just wanted, there was a question again, sorry. But
everyone loves compost.
Yeah, everyone loves compost. One was just adding to, and it's a volunteer here that works with LA Compost occasionally up at our site, but she said she encourages people to compost at home only because they'll actually see how much food they are producing rather than just dropping it through a little drop-off hole in the window. Any plans for West Valley for LA Compost? That was another question.
Yeah, our approach
is, right?
Our approach, our approach is always partnering with an existing community organization. We never come into a place to build from scratch. We always build upon the goodness that is already there. So the reasoning behind it is there's trust, transparency, a good level of just solid foundation and good footwork. So I'm not in charge of our expansion plans. I would have to check in with the team on that, but there's definitely been conversations all throughout LA County. And there's no such thing as a way. So it's very much important to see this up front. And I will just speak on regards to just like COVID and what this time is. As wonderful as it is to cook more and garden more, I think it's important to recognize the fact that food insecurity is an all-time rise right now too, right? The food recovery agencies, the MENS, the food finders, the food forwards, they can't close their doors right now because they are constantly at an all-time peak of trying to keep up with the demand. And I think our first question, Elliott, was like, what does it mean to sustain? And we talked about to maintain. It means wholeness. It goes beyond environmentalism. I think we need to start to think about like how fragile the system is, and why is it that so many people can't become food insecure overnight. And like resiliency is true health and wholeness. And I think we need to kind of take a step back and look at these systems. And farmers are doing a great job by not throwing away the produce and contributing it to different food recovery agencies. But there's definitely two sides of the story as far as like the rise in food insecurity and the rise in, at least for myself, I'm very privileged that, let me garden more, let me cook more. But some people are doing that out of survival as well, right? Out of like no other option. So it's really important for us to look at the food distribution systems and ensure that no Angelino has to have a difficult time finding where their next meal is going to come from, because as we all know, within the food waste world, there is plenty of food. We throw away half of what we grow every year. So just want us to really think about that as a whole and really take a step back when we start to look at systems and broken and breaks within systems.
Yeah, and I think that notion of, and again, as Nat pointed out, everyone on this panel happens to be an educator, right? And I think there's something, the Master Gardener program, teaching at an institution, the workshops that LA Compost is putting on with sanitation, giving people the knowledge perhaps is the best step towards resiliency. Because I think what's really been highlighted to me in the advent of this pandemic is this is a massive city and the systems are going to break down, right? And if there's no net there, and I think that net has to be the education and the ability to understand how to get back to these basics of dealing with our waste, creating our sustenance, etc. We're about at an hour, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. It seems like the comment section is slowed down here. It was really rapid fire. I really want to say thank you to Neil and Terry for putting in a ton of the links there to all these resources. You know, in prepping for this, I wasn't aware of all of the kind of digital platform stuff that you guys are engaged in, and I think that really, to me, is a light in the darkness of this whole thing. That this information is getting put out there to connect this massive city. It's really hard, I think, sometimes in LA to feel connected. It's very easy to feel isolated, despite the fact that there's 10 million people swirling around you. And so I think these online platforms for this kind of information and knowledge is really imperative. Any closing thoughts, hopes, wishes, moving out into looking towards 2021?
Well, I'm honored. I'm just so honored and happy to be here. I do think, just again, as a historian, I always like to draw on the history of the landscape and thinking about the indigenous landscape, the Tongva, Gabrielino, Tataviam landscape, and how many of their practices are, I think that knowledge and extending that to the local community and some of the things we've all been highlighting is that's where I'm hopeful. And I think that folks, this is where resiliency comes from. So I'm going to continue to learn from these folks in these communities, and as I'm sure all of you are, and just excited to be here with all of you. So thank you.
Thanks, Nat.
I'm also very happy to have been included. Thank you so much, Elliott. And big shout out to the LAPL for being an amazing institution that ties us all together in this city that we love so much. And yeah, thank you for mentioning the indigenous people of Los Angeles, because that was a culture that was a food sharing culture. They had the food supplies, they harvested for the community. So we can think about them when we think about, how do we want the Los Angeles of the future to be? We don't have to have hungry families and kids going to bed hungry if we want it to be different.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the space, for the opportunity to speak. And I know hope is not a really good word to use, but I'm really excited for the future, just because the complex issues that we're facing are going to have to be met with complex solutions and imaginative ideas. And anyone you speak to who's doing this work in LA, the solutions, they are creating the solutions in the neighborhood, and that's just going to have a compounding effect when you start to see that across 88 zip codes. So honored to be a small part of this network, and yeah, keep it going.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, and of course, thank you for the amazing work that you all are doing. And my hope and dream, I look for more cross-pollination and collaboration. And
amen to that.
So thank you all so much, and thank you for everyone that turned into this program. And adios.
Great to see you guys.
Keep growing. I love you too.
Take care.